So we're just going to do a few examples when it comes to objects, and really highlighting like how it's different than Java. So we're not going to like define a class. We're just going to create an object. We're just going to construct an object without having a class in advance. And there's a couple different ways we can do this. I'm going to show you like three for completeness, but we really only ever use two of them. So this is all about object construction. Objects can be constructed in a few ways, like I just said. This is key. Properties can be added to objects after construction. Okay, we definitely can't do, we definitely can't do that in Java. There is this thing called object constructor syntax, which I'll show you. We hardly ever use it, but we can create an empty object with what's called object constructor syntax, and it looks like this. Let journal entry equal new object. Super like a lot like Java, right? As if capital O object is like our class name and we're making a new object. But what this does in JavaScript is the type of journal entry will be an object, but it will have no properties yet. And that's okay. Honestly, we like never write code like this because we look for something more concise in JavaScript. So in JavaScript, the way we usually do it is we create an empty object with what's called the object literal syntax. You'll see this a lot more. And an object literal is defined by curly braces. Okay. So because we have a pair of curly braces with nothing inside, this makes an empty object. You can think of like when we have an empty string, we have a pair of quotes with nothing inside. That's an empty string. An empty object is a pair of curly braces with nothing inside. So that's our empty object. Often when we create an object, though, we do use object literal syntax, but we specify some of the properties as key value pairs like right away. So we can create an object with properties, which are key value pairs. So kind of like a map in Java, a dictionary in Python. We do this in JSON format, which we're about to see. And objects may contain methods, may contain functions. We can call them methods, I guess. We're going to hold off on writing any methods and functions till later. We'll come back and add those in. I just want to focus on basic properties first. But here's what that would look like. Let's say we want to create a journal entry object, but we actually want to put some properties in it. The way the syntax for this with the key value pairs is we do the name of the property. Think like instance variable. So date, and then a colon, and then after that is the value. And so our date is going to be formatted as a string, 2025-11-17. That's today's date. Key value pairs are separated by commas. Employability. Let's just write competency. That's a hard word to spell. The I can't spell this one either. Competency. There we go. Our competency. What's one of our employability competencies? What's that? Adaptability. I'm just going to type adaptability. Adaptability. Can spell that. Excellent. And then we can have a content property where we have a journal entry. Adaptability. I'm very familiar with, you can type whatever you want here. I'm very familiar with Java, but I'm approaching JavaScript We can concatenate strings too, like with a plus here. And then I can say with an open mind. So that object literal syntax creates a new JavaScript object, assigns a reference to it to journal entry, very familiar, very similar to Java. It has three properties: date, competency, and content. All three are strings, and all three have the values specified there. The property is followed by a colon. The value comes after the colon. Different key value pairs are separated by commas. This is JSON format, JSON syntax. Well, there's more to JSON than that, and we'll see more of that later, but this is a good introduction. Let's log a bunch of stuff to see what things are. So let's do console.log. Let's log journal entry. See what it looks like when we log an object. Let's log the type of journal entry. And go ahead and run both of those. Remember to run, we'll talk more about how to debug in VS Code with JavaScript later, but this button up here is not going to work to run the code. We need to right-click on the file in the Explorer view, choose the run code option, and then we can see prints it out pretty nice, and it's of type object. The idea of visibility, like we have public and private in Java, not so much in JavaScript. All of the properties are accessible. So we don't need to write accessor and mutator methods. So that's a cause for celebration, perhaps. This is how we do it instead. So accessing properties. We're going to use the dot notation like in Java. So that's familiar. Non-existent properties. It's not like we get a compiler error. There's no compiling JavaScript code. They just return undefined. That property is undefined for the object. So we can do stuff like console.log. If I just want the date, I can do journal entry.date. That's how I access the value of that property. If I try to access a property that doesn't exist, like student name, when you run this, you'll see like it doesn't crash, runs just fine. It just returns a value of undefined. The property student name is undefined for this object. So again, if I run this, here's just the date printed. And here's undefined because student name isn't defined. But that's okay. We can define properties later. That's another convenient thing. Properties can be added to objects after construction. That's interesting. So I can say journal entry.student name equals Schmidt. You can put whatever name you want there. And now if I log it, it's going to work just fine. If you run it again, it'll print out the name. It won't be undefined anymore. This is super convenient at times. It can also lead to some tricky bugs where you haven't like fully specified all the properties for your JavaScript object at some point in the execution flow of your program, but you think you have, and then you have a bunch of things undefined and stuff isn't working. So, you know, it's powerful, but can cause trouble like most things. All right, last thing. This is what I think is the hardest concept in APCSA. So I want to reference it and, reference it. Object references, an object reference. Object references in JavaScript work just like in Java. which work just like in Python. We don't really talk about them in the context of Python, but it's all the same. So that's good news because this is tricky. So variables of type object have a value that is a reference to the object, like in Java. So this is good, okay? Like we're familiar with this. Copying an object reference is not the same as copying the object, like in Java, right? So again, we're being consistent at least. In JavaScript, you can use object.assign and structured clone to clone objects. This is beyond the scope of this course. We're not going to focus on either of these. I'm sharing this with you in case you're like, well, I do want to copy an object. I don't want to copy the reference. How do I do that? Search up object.assign and structured clone, and you can get some tips for that. Let's do a simple example just to reinforce this. If I make a new variable, new journal entry, and I assign it to journal entry, that copies the reference. It doesn't make a duplicate of the object and its properties. So if I say new journal entry dot date and I change the date, to like Wednesday, and then I log the original variable's date, there's only one object. I just have two variables now referring to the one and only JavaScript object that we created. And so therefore, it's going to have the new date. Okay. So I know this is tricky. I know this is challenging. I expect it was hard last year. The good news I've got for you is at least it's consistent with Java. So that's promising. All right, let's check our understanding with some pure instruction questions.